Well, we got a ride from the Mercedes-Benz. We took it for a spin, and lo and behold, we have a check engine light. Oh, this car just seems to be continually causing us grief. And yes, for anybody that's been following the other channel, Mercedes-Benz here, for some reason, has been just a glitchy problem. Now, we haven't really had check engine lights on this car a whole lot, but there's really only one way that I find that you're able to own a fleet of these vehicles, whether it's the Benz or whether it's the Porsche or whatever it is. You have to be able to do some of the work yourself. Because if every single time this thing had a fault or a code, I'd have to take it into the dealer, they want to charge you over 200 bucks. So let's forget about that. Let's take a look at this. We got a check engine light. I just took it out for a short trip around the block just to do a quick errand, and all of a sudden that's the first time I seen a check engine light. We've had a lot of fault codes, and some of the faults have been related to headlight problems and sensors and detecting other kinds of challenges within the vehicle, but that seems to be the first time we've actually had a check engine light. Now again, the only way to afford this is by doing some of yourself, so we're going to grab our code readers and we're going to dive into this. See, because I don't know what's worse, the car itself or the dealers that have been supposedly there to help us, that have been charging us all along the way. And even under warranty period, we didn't really get the support that we needed. You know, we identified a problem, they pulled the code, they reset it, and then the problem came back once the warranty ran out, and they said it had nothing to do with that, and now they want to charge us. See, that's how the game works. That's why buying new cars really is not that much peace of mind. My personal experience, drive something that's good, quality, fun, exciting, but something that you can maybe work on a little bit, because ideally these dealers are there for their own reasons. So let's take a look anyway. Let's pull a code, shall we? Okay, well, let's plug this in here. I think there's a code scan port here, OBD2 port right there. Okay, let's see what the code has to say here. The car's running. We get the check engine light on there, and let's see what this thing says. Okay, well, we can do a bunch of checks. Let's just see what the read codes here gives us. A P052E, P052E, P052E. All right, I like to just search it up. I just usually Google it. Quite often these cheaper code readers don't give you everything you need, but P052E. Because like I said, sometimes they need their specific Mercedes equipment, but I'm gonna pull this up and let's just see here. What does it say? Wow, this isn't good news. Mercedes, I type it in, Mercedes P052E code indicates a problem with the positive crankcase ventilation system, PCV, specifically the regulator valve. You know what the crappy thing is? I think I've heard of this issue being a common problem with these cars. This means that the crankcase pressure sensor isn't receiving the correct signal from the PCV valve. The PCV system is responsible for venting pressure from the engine's crankcase to prevent buildup of, you know, obviously we know what the PCV does, but this is not good. So we're gonna have to do some digging and try to understand what it's gonna take to maybe solve this issue. Yeah, the paper, so it does look like it's covered, but we have, the code is ECCC, number EGR, what is it, M0002 24-002. Does that sound like the code or the paper?
No, like what is the like what is it? There should be like a paragraph of writing on there.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, well, at the very top it says warranty extension intake line partial load ventilation valve.
Yeah, that's correct. That's the crankcase ventilation system.
Okay, and that's what's common, and they've extended the warranty then. Okay, perfect. All right, I will. I'll see what it takes, and I'll call you back to get it booked in here. Toot sweet. So.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks again for your help. Well, folks, we're not out of the woods yet, but we got this piece of paper from Mercedes-Benz, and essentially it's a warranty extension and a recall for a faulty part. And as I said, I was just talking to the service advisor after calling them and realizing that after doing some Googling, and see, this is what you don't know unless you start doing some of the research. And sometimes it works in your favor and sometimes it doesn't. But what I understand is that PCV, let's take a look under the hood here, shall we? Actually, before we even get started, but let's just pop the hood here. And again, you know, you've got to learn some of the ins and outs, do your homework, keep your paperwork when it comes time to open these or deal with these cars. So let's just pop this up. Now, apparently the PCV on that code, the PCV is down in this area here somewhere. Now, what I know is that apparently they say, Mercedes just said it's about a 5-hour job. I've heard other people say it's about 10 hours, 8 to 10 hours, whatever it is. It's a lot of labor, even at, you know, 5 or 6 hours, plus the part being about 500 bucks. You're dealing with, you know, a repair that's $2,500, maybe in Canada is $3,000. So it's something you definitely want to do your homework on. Now, I don't want to start digging into this, and if I didn't do my homework, I'd probably just start calling the parts department and ordering up the part and spend 10 hours on the garage or on the driveway trying to get this fixed. But that's the beauty, doing some of that homework yourself, and I'll keep you in on the loop what's been going on with this whole failure and that issue. But this is the first time we just experienced that. So here we go. More fun times with the Mercedes-Benz. We know this car has been a lot of problems through and through. I mean, we like it. It's fun to drive. It's economical from, you know, fueling perspective. But owning these is not that cheap. And fortunately, like I said, the way I've been managed to keep a lot of these vehicles in the fleet is by fixing a lot of it myself. And the Porsche is no different. I mean, Porsche, actually, I just went through some major repairs on this myself. Well, not repairs. I already mentioned on the last video about how I had to deal with some contamination in the coolant. So what I was able to do was I flushed it. I spent a day on the driveway, flushed the cooling system out with water, distilled water. And that's very labor intensive. See, that's the thing. When you're dealing with these cars, nothing comes cheap. When they're charging you $220 an hour shop rate, some of these vehicles, they just end up costing you a ton of money to maintain. But basically, I had to get this vehicle, flush it out with water 2 or 3 times, and then I flushed it through with coolant, put it into a jug, and I'll be sending that off to the recycle station. But basically, I had to spend a day here running this vehicle, running the fluids through it, running it fluid, flush, 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 flush. Because it looks like after the repair that they did of fixing those heads, it was flushed, but I don't think it was totally flushed well enough. And there was still a little bit of contamination in there. Now, I've been driving it for a while. After the flush, I haven't seen any new contamination. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that we don't have any issues, that we don't have a new crack or a new issue, because that's what caused that oil in the coolant in the first place. And mixing is one of the common issues for a lot of these Porsches, whether it's a Boxster or a 996, 997. You can get oil and coolant dilution or mixing, and that's a bad scene. But doing some of this work myself, I was able to save a crap ton of money. But fortunately, hopefully, we're keeping the fingers crossed, we don't have more repairs to take care of on the Porsche. The Mercedes, for now, stay tuned, because we're going to keep you updated on this PCV valve issue and the P025E that we just spit out on that car. I'm not going to drive it a lot, because they say when you start dealing with that, you're pouring oil into the intake, oil gets into the electronic connectors and the fittings. And sometimes it'll blow blue smoke, the car runs rough. And I noticed that the car was running a little bit, chugging a little bit rougher than it normally does. So it definitely seems to be tied to the PCV, and we're gonna see what the dealership does, but we have to check it in, and we sort of have to go in on a song and a dance. But stay tuned, everybody. I know a lot of you probably ask yourselves the question, why would you go through all that trouble and heartbreak to drive these cars that are unreliable? But the fact remains is, you know what, years ago, and I've mentioned this story before, it really comes down to once you first have that first experience, that sort of aha moment. And that aha moment for me was driving or riding along in a buddy's old 911. And I had that aha moment that there was something special about a lot of these cars. And I wish I didn't have this passion for fun cars. I really wish I didn't, but the point is I do. And so what I've learned by not making a ton of money throughout my career, just sort of making middle-class cash, basically being that guy that just kind of works you out the 9-to-5 grind and makes a modicum of income. I've always enjoyed driving these cars, because when you drive, you know, especially a lot of the European cars, you find that they have sort of a feel that you can't put on paper, but they just have that intangible feeling that you get when you drive them. And I just could never put my finger on it, other than the fact that they all give you that sort of driving sensation. Now, with that, unfortunately, comes expensive repairs and maintenance. So along the way, you know, I'm not a mechanic by trade. Certainly I've gone through the electrical industry. That's been my trade, but I've always been hands-on, and I'm not scared to work because of being in the electrical trade. But one thing I've learned along the way is you're a product of your environment. And so by getting tools, for me, code readers are one of my best tools. You know, I have a gambit of specialized tools as well in the garage that I decided to buy. Every time I needed to buy a specialized tool, a puller or a wrench, I'll just go buy it. And then I'll say, well, that saved me money now. See, by buying these funky tools, these specialized tools, it might cost me $300, but then I know, like, if I take the car to the shop, they're going to charge me $200, $300, $400 diagnostics, get to the bottom of it. And yeah, they're professionals. But you know what? You realize that eventually you'll need that tool again, possibly, and maybe again and again sometimes. And so the idea of just fiddling around, figuring it out, Googling it, YouTube's a beautiful thing, and so is the internet. And so I've been able to own a lot of our cars, enjoy the driving experience, because let's face it, I mean, a Toyota Corolla is probably one of the most reliable cars you can possibly ever dream of, but who wants to drive that? Like, honestly, not me. That's why I don't drive a Corolla. That's why, you know, we got a Porsche, we got a BMW, we got the new car in the garage, which I ran a poll there, and a lot of you are guessing what it might be, and I'm going to be sharing that very, very soon because we just received delivery of that very recently. And of course we got the Benz. You know, my wife likes to drive these kind of cute cars too, so we sort of have this taste. And if you can say, I'll be honest, just under the breath, right? What do you call it? Wine taste on a beer budget? Well, that's kind of where we're at. And so I've learned to just fix a lot of these cars myself. If it gets too big of a repair, too big of an issue, yeah, I've got to bite the bullet and I've got to take the car in for a repair. But I'll always do my best to try to fix it myself. And if there's any money to be left on the table, I'd rather not. So sometimes you got to pay, but sometimes, you know, if you think about over the course of, you know, 10, 15, 20 years of owning these vehicles, how much you've saved, you can save by doing oil changes, you know, thermostat replacements, starter changes, you know, alternator replacements, battery swaps, even simple crap, that basic maintenance that a lot of people just sort of, they shy away from. They don't have the tools or the space. Maybe they live in an apartment, whatever. I have just enough space, and I just deal with a lot of these repairs and smaller maintenance items myself. You know, a lot of you, if you look back in my history in the Lambo ownership time frame, I did a full exhaust swap on that. I did an E-gear, not E-gear swap, but I basically did a 2B exhaust upgrade on that. So I had the whole back end of the car ripped apart, and I wasn't scared to get into that. You know, I've done a lot of work on a lot of my cars. I'm not scared to, and that's the way I've found to live this life. Enjoy these cars. Enjoy the rich lifestyle without having to have the rich bankroll. So in other words, I just fix it myself, maintain the fleet. So that's really what I'm about. And we're going to do a lot more of this. So you're going to want to follow along the channel, because a lot of us aren't loaded. But doesn't mean we have to live like paupers. Why don't we live the high life? Wouldn't you rather live a good life and not necessarily drive that more basic mundane car? Now, I drive a mundane vehicle too. I have an old Ram. Sometimes you just need to do some hauling duties in that. So I have an old pickup truck too that I use from time to time, but realistically, it's just so great having something that you can get in, rip around, have some fun, that's exciting to drive, and just really entertains your day. If everything else is boring and ho-hum, there's nothing else to do, well then go grab the keys to the 911, drop the top, go for a spin. It just makes your day. Anyway, be sure to subscribe. If you love the idea of not being overly wealthy, but you want to drive the wealthy type cars and enjoy some of the wealthy lifestyle, definitely want to hit that subscribe button, because that's what we're all about. Yeah, stretching beyond our means, some would assume that. Not really, not if I'm just not spending the money, right? Have you ever heard of a book called The Wealthy Barber? It's not about how much you make, it's how much you save, really. So you can, you know, you can make all the money in the world, and I know some of the richest people that spend all their money and they're broke. Or people that have less money, but they're managed to accrue and accumulate assets and their own little personal wealth just by doing things right. So that's what we're about. Anyway, with all of that said, be sure to subscribe. Hope to see each and every one in the next one, everybody. See you then. Bye-bye.